Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video I want to talk about PhD rejection and if you should be concerned if you get a rejection from your PhD application, or if you get some results back from your application, if you should be concerned about that at all. So if you don't know me, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. So I created this sort of sharing economy proofreading application to get feedback on your writing, and now I'm doing these YouTube videos because I really honestly want to help you as much as I can. So PhD rejection and PhD sort of admission rejection results. What does that mean when you get rejected from your application? Well, I want to point out that if you do get rejection during any sort of process of a PhD and becoming a more prolific researcher, anything like that, if you're trying to get into a PhD program, don't worry about it. It is part of the process. Everybody that is in a PhD or has done a PhD gets rejected all the time. It's a natural part of every single process that we do. And you have to experience probably 3, 4, 5 rejections before anything will stick, right? So with the same thing with your admissions process, we deal with that all the time, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples. Papers that I write, they get rejected. So I will spend about 6 months writing a paper, maybe 4 to 6 months writing a paper, analyzing data, going through everything, and then I'll send it into a journal and it'll get rejected. And sometimes what will happen is I will send it into a journal and then it'll get a revise. So you revise it, you'll spend about 1.5 years working on this silly paper, and then it'll get rejected. Any of the grants and scholarships and anything like that, people will submit. The normal process as a young assistant professor is you submit to the granting agency, and you'll have to submit maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 different times, and you'll get rejected every single time until one actually sticks. It's just a process that we actually go through. Is you just keep going and keep pushing forward with everything that you do. And when you first start out, you're kind of like, why are they doing this to me? Is this kind of the normal thing? I don't really feel all that good. I kind of feel like a loser. Everybody experiences that. It's just the process that you go through. So I want to talk about, if you do get a rejection from your admissions, what should you do, right? So the first thing is I would just quickly move on as quickly as you possibly can from that rejection, and don't let it sort of get to you personally. What does it actually tell you in terms of that PhD rejection on your admissions? It just means that you're playing with small numbers. That's it, right? So there might be a total of maybe 3 or 4 people that the program can submit or that can accept into the program, right? And if there is simply one other person or 2 other people that are just slightly better than you, then you won't make that threshold of getting into the program, right? And you're just working with very, very small numbers. And when you work with very small numbers, it's highly sensitive to a lot of noise that happens, right? So it might be just that their application looked a little bit better. Maybe they're, in my field, so in business, maybe their GMAT score was like a 710 and yours was a 680, whatever it was, right? It's just slightly off, and it makes them look a little bit more favorable. They will get the offers, and then they will accept those offers. And if everybody accepts those offers, then it's not going to go through down the list, right? So generally they're ranked order, the candidates are ranked ordered somehow. So what I would suggest to you is not really to worry about that. Getting into any PhD program is just very, very sensitive. It's highly nuanced in a lot of different ways. And all it takes is just a couple of people that are a little bit better than you in terms of what their application looks at. And it doesn't mean that they're better than you as a candidate or a person. It just means that their package, their application looks a little bit better than you. It's the same thing with the granting agency. When you apply you'll spend you'll write 40, 50 pages on a grant and send it in, and you just won't get it. It's just because you're just slightly below the cutoff. Doesn't mean that you as a person is not a good researcher or whatnot. It just looks like your package is just not ready. Your application is not ready, right? So what should you do in terms of when you actually do get this? Personally, I would move on as quickly as you can, so don't let this sort of emotional response get to you. The other thing that I would do is you can either try to find some other program that's going to fit you a little bit better right now, and there's lots of programs. I mean, there's probably 1,000 programs in the world right now that are credible. 100 of them for sure are credible. So that's a lot of options that you can submit to and sort of see if something's going to work out with you. The other thing that you can do is just keep working at it, right? So normally this is what we do once you get into the process and you actually become you start working on your PhD and you start getting into becoming an assistant professor, an associate, and a full professor. This is what you have to do. You can't just sort of go to another place. You have to build up your program. You have to build up who you are, your sort of personal profile before you can actually go on and go further with what you're doing, right? So how do you do that? Well, then you say, okay, this is what you need to do to get into the program next year. So let's say you are trying to apply to, I don't know, maybe it's Princeton. Doesn't matter which program it is. You're trying to apply to get into Princeton. And you're looking at it and you're like, you know what, I would really like to get into, maybe it's the economics program there. Well, then you look at what all of their things, their general cutoffs are, and then you keep working at those. So maybe for a GRE score or something, I don't know if they do a GMAT score there. I don't think, Princeton's kind of outside me, or you know what, maybe a better one that I would, maybe Harvard Business School, right? You want to go to Harvard Business School. So you look at what their GMAT scores are. Maybe most of the people that get into Harvard Business School, they have a 750 or, a 760 or 780 on the GMAT score. So then you go about of trying to obtain that 760, right? So you actually study and you work hard and you maybe spend like months and months and months studying for this thing, maybe a year studying for this thing, building up your GMAT score to get into that, right? That's really what you have to do. Then you start working on sort of your research profile. You start working on papers and start writing things or trying to find people to write with. You start sort of building up your application. You start building up who you are before you actually apply and go through that process again. And that's what we all have to do in this game. And it's one of those unfortunate things. It's just rejection is really part of everything that you do in academia. You're going to experience probably 5, 6 rejections before you get an accept with anything. Doesn't matter what you're doing. And when you first start out, it really does hurt and you're not really used to this sort of experience. But what it's saying is not that you're trash, you're garbage, but what it's saying is you just have to work on a couple of aspects of your application. So what I would maybe do is maybe list out on a spreadsheet of the different things that they're looking for in an application, rank order those things of how your current application looks compared to what they're experiencing wherever you want to go to, and simply go about going to the top one. So this is just like operations management. If you were to do an MBA, this is what you would teach. I did this in a manufacturing plant. Is you just rank order the problems that you're currently experiencing, right? So you rank order your characteristics on a spreadsheet, and then you just go to the top one and you say, this is the most important thing. So maybe your GMAT score is right now, it is a 650. Well, then you go and you work at it and you get your GMAT score to a 710. And then after that, you're like, okay, what's the next thing in the lineup? Okay, I don't have, my undergrad GPA is not good enough. So we'll go get a couple of more courses to get your GPA up, right? Like you just keep working at it until your application looks really good and you look very stellar, but until you can actually get into a PhD program. And I know I'm trying to make this sound a little bit more simpler than it is, but it's going to be a journey. It's a long process to go through this, but we all have to go through this. I guarantee it. Talk to any professor around the world. They're going to say that it is a journey, and the whole thing is just working at it and keep pushing forward. Some people are very fortunate and they're very lucky. Either they're very talented, they're born with good genes, and they're very talented at one particular thing, and it allows them to become a great academic. And some people are born into academic families and they know all about this kind of stuff all the way through. But if you're like me, I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. I'm not all that bright. I don't, my parents, I was the first one to go to university of my entire family. It's a journey, and that's what you have to sort of experience going forward, is that it is a journey and you have to keep working at those things. So I wouldn't take those PhD rejection results very seriously in the short term. What I would do is keep using that as feedback of what you need to improve to continue on to push forward. You know what the good thing is, if you continue to keep pushing forward when you get this PhD rejection and you keep contacting the people that you're interested in working with, it looks like you're really serious. And if you do that 2 or 3 years in a row and you keep working at it, so maybe your GMAT score was initially 450, and you come back and you work at it and you get your GMAT score to 700, well, all of a sudden you look like a very serious candidate, and you look like a great candidate because you brought it up so much. And if you're in constant contact with people and you say, I'm really interested in what you're doing, I would be happy to work with you in any sort of way that I can. Person replies no. And then you just come back in 6 months and say, I did some more work. I'd love to work with you. I've done this, this, and this. Then you come back to you and say no. You do it again in another year, and you just keep working at it and keep chipping away until eventually you get into the program. And so this is a really safe way to get into a PhD program. It's a very effective way. And it will work. I guarantee it's going to work. And if you won't get into that one program, well, you've already built up your application to make yourself look so attractive to everybody else that they are going to accept you. So if you don't get into Harvard Business School, so what? Then you just go to Stanford GSB, right? You just work at it until you just get better and better over time. And yes, it's a process. It's work. It's hard. But you know what? Everybody else is in the same boat. So hopefully this explains a little bit with PhD rejection and with that admission process. Don't worry about it. It's part of the process. And on our side, if you're trying to get into any particular program, we sort of move on. It's part of the process. It's part of the system. And if you view it as sort of a system of improving what you're doing, and you take that as good feedback to improve what you're doing, you've understood what we're trying to do. It's the same way when you're doing paper submissions and grant submissions. You get rejection, rejection, rejection. You refine, improve on what you're doing, get better at that. The next time you go up, after 4 or 5 years, you will get into the program. And guess what? If you're working and you're doing this on the side and you're just kind of pushing forward on it, so what, right? Like it's your hobby. You're having fun at this, right? So at the end of the day, you're not really out that much other than it's just your hobby and your dream of going forward. All right, so hopefully you like this video. Give me a thumbs up if you do, and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, take care. Bye.